Welcome to a moment of serenity. Here, where everything calms down and doors open to a beautiful silence that touches the soul. Let your breaths flow slowly and leave your day behind. If you find comfort and pleasure in this kind of content, I would be delighted for you to join us, so you are always on time for the upcoming sessions. And now, let's begin our journey toward calmness and serenity. Nights in the distant ages, thousands upon thousands of years ago, were unlike our nights today in ways the modern mind can barely imagine. There were no lights to disturb the darkness, no noise to break the stillness, and no screens to confuse the sense of night and day. The earth was vast, quiet except for the whispers of the wind, the pulse of the fire, and the distant sounds of wandering creatures. In the heart of this primordial world, early humans knew sleep in a way we no longer do. It was a sleep that sank deep into the layers of consciousness and restored the body with every dawn. They awaited the night as if it were an honored guest. They did not fear it. They prepared for it. Before sunset, members of the group gathered around the fire, making sure there was enough wood to keep the flames alive until the early hours of the morning. They believed the fire was not only a source of warmth, but a guardian spirit that filled the place with reassurance and allowed them to drift into their long sleep. Everything around them whispered that the night was an unquestioned ruler, and sleep an ancient ritual performed slowly and reverently. Before sleeping, each person chose their spot carefully. Some lay close to the fire. Others positioned themselves on higher rocks to guard the group, taking turns from night to night. Sleep was not separate from their lives, but part of their order, their instinct, their harmony with nature. They recognized every sound of the night, the rustling grass, the owl's call, the wind threading through the trees. Yet they slept with a depth close to complete stillness, because their bodies were accustomed to aligning with the earth, not resisting it when they closed their eyes. Thoughts did not exhaust them, nor did worries weigh them down. They had no noise of the future, no anxiety about tomorrow, no chaos of cities. They lived day by day, sleeping when night arrived and waking when the sky turned into a soft ash color announcing dawn. Their brains knew the night well, like an old companion who knows when to arrive and when to depart. That is why they fell into a deep sleep, one that researchers today say was deeper than the modern humans, more in tune with nature's rhythm. Around them, the scent of damp earth, the smoke of burning wood, and the warmth of the fire created a mysterious world that encouraged relaxation. They slipped away from the consciousness of daytime with ease, as if tranquility descended on them with the first shadows of night. They entered their sleep the way a traveler enters a safe cave during a storm. With every exhale, they released their weight into the ground, as if returning to the earth what the day had taken from them. On some nights, large animals passed in the distance, slow steps or a muted growl rolling across the valley. Still, fear rarely disturbed their sleep, because they had learned over thousands of years that nature was not an enemy, but a partner in survival. They allowed their bodies to rest with trust, as if they were part of the night, not strangers within it, and if a strong wind blew or a predator approached, one guard would awaken and gently rouse the others, moving together in quiet coordination, knowing what to do without many words. Their sleep took place directly on the ground, on beds of dry grass or animal hides, allowing the body to settle into a natural, straight position that relaxed the muscles and made breathing deep and steady. There were no high pillows or soft mattresses, just simplicity that let the body function as it was made to. They slept for long hours, but it was true sleep, the kind that rebuilt what the day had broken and gave them the strength to continue their journey. With every dawn, as light streamed through the trees, early humans awakened as if returning from another world. They woke without fatigue, without headaches, without exhaustion. They opened their eyes to the songs of birds and felt the night had reshaped them. Sleep renewed their energy completely because it was not divided by noise, screens, or distractions. They slept the way the earth itself sleeps, fully and deeply, despite the simplicity of their lives. Their sleep had a meaning deeper than we might imagine. It was sacred time, a moment to renew the spirit, a necessity to protect the group from the challenges of the coming day. They knew that anyone who did not sleep well could not hunt, walk long distances, or survive the vast world around them. So they made sure their sleep was complete, deep, silent, stretching from the heart of night to the edge of dawn. Across thousands of years, early humans lived their nights in nature's embrace, learning from it how to sleep, how to awaken, and how to trust a night that darkens, then brightens again. In this quiet, primordial world, humans slept more deeply than we do today, because life was simple, rhythm steady, and the night unrivaled by anything. All that remains of that ancient time is a distant memory, whispering that sleep was once purer, truer, and closer to the human soul. As centuries passed, night became more than rest. It became a time of connection, weaving invisible bonds among the group. Before sleeping, they sat around the fire in solemn silence, as if listening to the earth breathing. The fire threw gentle, dancing shadows on their faces, shadows that looked almost mythical, like the features of ancestors long gone. Perhaps this faint light and this stillness, blended with nature's whispers, formed the doorway that led them into deep sleep. In those minutes before drifting off, peaceful animals like gazelles and wild hares would appear from afar to drink from streams, while predators, tigers, and large felines stayed on the edges, as if aware the humans were gathered and the fire surrounded them with an unseen aura that intimidated them. Early humans lived alongside these dangers without panic, knowing that sleep was essential for survival, and that excess fear brought no benefit. They chose their sleeping sites with great care. Tribes living near forests preferred resting beneath large trees that sheltered them from light rain, while people of the plains slept in open circular groups, leaving the center for the fire. Some would place stones around the area to form a protective ring, believing those stones guarded them from evil spirits and granted deeper rest. On the outer edges lay the strong members who served as guards. They slept in a half-sleep, their breaths slow, but their ears alert. When full night arrived, another world appeared. The sky became an endless black expanse filled with stars, shining with a clarity we can no longer see under modern city lights. Early humans saw the galaxy clearly and watched the stars change positions with the seasons. Night became part of their knowledge, an open school teaching them directions, hunting seasons, and migration paths. This connection with the clear sky gave them a sense of belonging to the cosmos, helping them sleep without disturbance, for they felt they were never alone. Near midnight, deep sleep overtook everyone. Their bodies relaxed completely, sinking toward the ground as if returning to their origin. They had no soft pillows or heavy blankets, yet they felt a strange warmth, an inner heat from their strong bodies, which science now knows were more resilient and adapted to nature than ours. Their heartbeats aligned with the sound of the wind, their nervous systems unburdened by information, and they surrendered to a sleep that rebuilt their cells in ways we no longer experience. Their dreams were different from ours, primitive, simple, but vivid. They dreamt of travel, of hunting, of animals, of river sounds. The mind did not wander into the complexities of the future, but replayed the scenes of daily life, as if training them for what awaited tomorrow. That is why waking up was easy, without chaos or heaviness, as if sleep was opening their eyes rather than closing them. On stormy nights, heavy rain hammered the ground. They would gather closer to the fire, cover themselves with animal skins, and hold their children for warmth. Despite thunder and lightning, they slept, for they were used to nature's voice. They did not see storms as threats, but as part of life's cycle. To them, the sky was a mother who sometimes grew angry, but her anger was understandable. Over time, scientists observed that early humans experienced two phases of sleep: a first sleep in the early night, then a brief awakening before entering a second, deeper sleep. During this short interval, they whispered, tended the fire, or gazed at the sky, then returned to longer rest that renewed them completely. This nighttime pause, which has vanished from modern life, made their sleep more balanced. Occasionally, The oldest member of the group awoke before everyone else, gathering wood, inspecting animal tracks, and sitting beside the fire to watch a tiny flame struggle to survive. This elder knew that studying the night was part of wisdom, that sleep was not just rest, but part of the tribe's survival. In those moments, he sometimes heard a distant roar or heavy footsteps. But he did not fear them. He knew every creature had its share of the night. At dawn, when light seeped through rocks and slowly pushed the darkness away, the whole group woke together, as if reborn. The first sounds they heard were the songs of birds, nature's announcement of a new day. They stretched their bodies, drank from water pouches, and ate what remained of yesterday's hunt. All of them felt real energy, as if they had slept in the Earth's own embrace through thousands of years. Humans lived in harmony with the night, understanding its value, accepting its silence, letting their bodies sink into the deepest forms of rest without resistance. Nature taught them that sleep was not an escape from life, but a part of it. And that night was not a frightening darkness, but a time that restored the spirit. Long before the first villages rose from the earth, before tools became more than sharpened stones, and before humans understood the rhythm of seasons, a small band of early people lived on the edge of a vast savanna. Life then was not measured in years or achievements, but in sunrises survived and nights endured. Every morning began the same. The men would leave camp to track animals, sometimes for food, sometimes simply to understand their movements. The women searched for roots, berries, and leaves, their eyes trained to read the land like a quiet language. The children ran barefoot, chasing each other among the trees, unaware that the world they played in was older and wilder than anything their young minds could grasp. But the river tested them each day. One evening, as the sun sank low and painted the water red, a deep thudding sound rose from the reeds on the opposite bank. The tribe froze. They knew the sounds of deer, boar, even predators like lions, but this was different. And then they saw it. A massive crocodile, larger than any they had imagined, slid silently toward the shallows. Its back broke the surface like the spine of some ancient creature. Its jaws, long and bone-hard, glimmered faintly in the dying light. It moved with the confidence of a ruler patrolling its domain. For days, no one dared approach the river. They drank from muddy pits farther inland, washed quickly, and fled back to camp. But fear, if left unattended, becomes an enemy worse than any beast. Finally, the leader decided they had to face the creature. Before sunrise, the men gathered. The plan was simple: lure the crocodile into a wooden trap built in a shallow crossing, block its escape, attack together, survive. Simple, but not easy. They waited for hours, the heat rising around them like steam. Sweat rolled into their eyes. Muscles trembled from remaining still, just when doubt began to spread. The water rippled. The massive reptile glided forward, step by step. It moved toward the shallows and entered the trap. The leader dropped his hand. The men pulled heavy logs into place. Closing the path behind the beast, the crocodile thrashed violently, its tail smashing water into the air. The ground shook with each strike. One man stumbled, another nearly fell into the creature's jaws. But they held their ground. They drove spears into its thick hide. The wood snapped again and again. The monster twisted, lunged, roared with a guttural sound that echoed across the plain. Then, Oren's spear struck its eye. The creature bellowed, blind with pain. That moment was enough. They attacked together, shouting, stabbing, pushing through their fear until finally, the giant fell still. When it was done, the men sat breathless in the mud, their bodies streaked with water and blood, their chests heaving, but in their eyes burned a victory deeper than survival for the first time. They had conquered something that once ruled them while they hunted and fought. Ira, the sharp-eyed woman of the tribe, spent her days near a small pool inland. She played with seeds, planting them in soft soil, watering them lightly. No one understood why she bothered. Plants grew everywhere. Why tend to a few tiny sprouts? But Ira saw what others did not. Weeks passed. The plants grew into small, vibrant patches of green. When she harvested them, she found the seeds had multiplied, clean, edible, easier to gather than chasing prey across the plains. She approached the leader and said quietly, "The earth gives back, if we give first." He did not fully understand her words, but he understood the evidence in her hands, and so they built the first storage pit, lined with stones, covered with wood and leaves, for the first time in their lives. They were not living day to day, but storing, planning, and preparing. A seed of civilization was beginning to sprout, but stability brings new dangers. One morning, after a stormy night, they found footprints near the camp. Human footprints, many of them. Smaller than their men, larger than their women, and unmistakably not from their tribe. The prints led toward the forest. That night, no one slept. The leader sat beside the fire. Oren watched the darkness with tense eyes. Ira hid her seeds somewhere no one could find them. They all knew the truth. They were not the only humans walking the earth. Another tribe existed somewhere beyond the trees. A tribe that could become friend or threat. And so, that chapter of their journey ended. Not in silence, but in anticipation. For the early humans had begun to change. They had learned to hunt with strategy, to gather with thought, to plan, to store, to plant. They had begun to understand fire, land, and each other in the quiet hours before dawn. The leader looked at his people, sleeping close, safe for now, and realized something profound. Survival was no longer enough. Now they were shaping a future. Above them, ancient stars watched silently. Below them, the river whispered as if recognizing the birth of something new, from fear and cold and hunger. Humans rose, and for the first time, they understood that they were not simply creatures of the earth. They were its makers. From that spark, the long human journey began, the story of humanity. In the days that followed the discovery of the strange footprints, an uneasy stillness settled over the tribe. Even the wind seemed to move differently, whispering through the grass in a cautious hush. The forest, once a familiar boundary, now felt alive with hidden eyes. Every sound, a snapping twig, a distant cry, a rustle in the leaves became a possibility, a warning. But life did not pause. The children still needed food. The fire still needed fuel. The river, though dangerous, was still the tribe's lifeline. So the leader gathered his people at dawn. His voice was low, steady, almost ceremonial. "We are not alone," he said, "and the world will not change for us. We will adapt as we always have." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of something larger than anyone there could name. Over the next few days, the men scouted farther and wider than before. They found more signs, ashes from an old fire, a cracked tool stone, and a fallen tree whose bark bore the unmistakable marks of stone blades. Whoever these other humans were, they were close. Oran took 3 hunters with him and ventured deep into the trees. The forest was dense here, roots twisting beneath their feet, branches interlocking into a roof that filtered sunlight into a perpetual twilight. But Oran moved with the confidence of someone who had grown up reading the earth like a living story. They found a small clearing, scattered with footprints, some fresh, some older. A piece of animal bone, scraped clean with skill. A braided fiber strip, something used to tie tools or carry bundles. "They are like us," one hunter whispered. "No," Oran said. "They are not like us. Not yet. We do not know their hearts." He felt the truth settle in his bones. Meeting them could bring friendship, or it could bring the end of everything they knew. Ira's vision. Meanwhile, Ira continued tending her hidden plants. She took seeds from the strongest ones, replanted them in separate spots, and protected them with stones so animals wouldn't trample them. She noticed something remarkable. Plants grown with more space became taller. Plants given more water grew faster. Those shielded from wind survived storms better, without naming it. She was discovering the idea of cultivation. One evening, she approached the leader and Oran with new seeds cupped in her hand. "These are ours," she said. "Not from the wild. Grown by us. If the others come, if they are hostile, then this will keep our children alive." The leader looked at the seeds as if they were something holy. Oran looked at Ira with something like respect, and something deeper. "You think of the future," he said. "I think of survival," she replied. "But not the survival of today, the survival of the next seasons, the next years." Her words stayed with them long after she walked away, the night of the voices. Several nights later, long after the fire had burned low, they heard it. Voices. Human voices. Distant. Faint. Drifting through the trees in a chorus of murmurs. Not the calls of animals. Not wind. Not imagination. Real. The tribe stirred. Mothers gathered their children. Hunters reached for spears. The leader stood silently, eyes narrowed toward the darkness. No one approached the camp. The voices passed like ghosts through the forest and vanished. But the message was clear. The others were near enough to watch them. No one slept until dawn, preparing for what comes. The leader made a decision. "We will not wait to be found. We will prepare." They strengthened their shelters with thicker branches. The men sharpened new spears. The women prepared more food, drying meat over slow flames to last through uncertain days. Even the children were taught to read the land more carefully, to sense danger in the subtle change of a bird's call, or in the sudden silence of insects, and Ira taught them something new: how to plant the seeds she had nurtured, how to choose good soil, how to dig without harming the tender roots. The tribe listened to her with a seriousness that surprised even her. She was no longer merely a gatherer. She had become the keeper of knowledge. It happened on a morning thick with mist. Oran and 2 hunters were tracking a herd of antelopes when they reached a patch of tall grass. The herd's scent was fresh. They crouched low. Then Oran heard breath, human breath, just beyond the grass. He signaled for silence. From the fog emerged 3 figures. Humans, but not from his tribe. Their hair was braided in a strange pattern, their bodies painted with ash-white streaks. They carried long, narrow spears tipped with black stone unlike anything Oren had seen. Their eyes were sharp, scanning the land with practiced focus. They froze when they saw Oren. For a long moment, no one moved. The air was heavy, thick with tension. Even the birds seemed to hold back their songs. Oren slowly lowered his spear. He placed it on the ground. A gesture of peace. The strangers looked at one another. Then the tallest among them stepped forward and mirrored his action. A single moment of understanding passed between them. Fragile, uncertain, but real. But the meeting ended abruptly when a sudden roar thundered from the trees. A massive boar, startled by their presence, charged out of the underbrush. The strangers scattered. Oren jumped aside. Chaos erupted. The boar vanished into the mist, leaving behind only broken grass and trembling breaths. And when Orhan looked up, the strangers were gone. No tracks, no voices, no trace. As if the fog had swallowed them whole. But he knew they would meet again. Weeks passed. The air grew cooler. Storms rolled across the plain with the power of ancient gods. Food became scarcer. Animals migrated south. The river swelled and changed course. The tribe faced a test greater than any beast, a test of endurance. Yet something had changed among them. They shared food more carefully. They planned hunts together. They built stronger shelters against the wind. And Ira's plants grew taller, stronger, enough to feed many. They were no longer a simple group of wanderers. They were becoming something else, a community shaped by shared fear, shared work, and shared hope. And in the leader's heart, a new thought began to form. If they could survive the beasts, if they could survive the storms, if they could learn to shape the land, then perhaps they could survive the other humans as well. Perhaps they could even learn from them. Perhaps the world was wide enough for more than one tribe. They rose before the sun most days, long before the first warmth touched the valley floor. Darkness was not their enemy. It was simply a part of their existence, something they had learned to move through with instinctive caution. The ancient humans who lived in that remote corner of the world understood that survival favored the patient, the observant, the ones who could read silence as clearly as others read speech. They walked lightly over damp earth, each step chosen, each breath controlled. The world around them, still young, still filled with titanic beasts and unpredictable seasons, demanded this constant awareness. As time passed, their hunt for the giant bull mammoth became more than a task. It transformed into a gradual unfolding of knowledge. They learned its moods, its favored path, the angles at which the sunlight flashed off its tusks. They watched it during the warmer days, not just from afar, but from the shifting edges of its world, moving with the wind, learning to understand the meaning behind its grunts and the rhythm of its steps. On certain evenings, they crouched behind low shrubs as the mammoth scratched its hide against old stone, sending echoes across the land. Every detail mattered, the way it lifted its trunk to taste the air, the slight limp in its right hind leg, the pause it made before lowering its head to drink. The hunters grew older and wiser through these quiet studies. They sharpened their tools, carved bone hooks, corrected the curvature of spears. Their survival was a long equation made of endless adjustments, errors made, losses mourned, knowledge gained, and resilience rebuilt. Their tools improved because their minds sharpened. Their minds sharpened because the world around them forced them to keep learning. One of the younger hunters began practicing silent approach techniques more obsessively than the others. He learned how to place his feet on cold leaves without causing a whisper. He trained himself to breathe so lightly that mist barely formed in front of his lips. He could now approach deer close enough to feel the heat radiating from their flanks. His elders noticed this skill, and they relied on him more and more. Through him, they learned which animals were restless in the night, where the wolves shifted their camps, and how the mammoth's herd responded to certain disturbances. When the season of longer shadows arrived, the valley changed. Fog crawled over the plains most mornings, and the mammoths kept closer together. Wary of predators, the hunters used this shift to their advantage. They no longer relied solely on endurance. They used the weather, the shifting winds, and the uncertain haze to mask their movement. They crept with measured confidence along routes they had memorized over years. Eventually, the day of the hunt arrived not as a moment of sudden decision, but as the natural culmination of everything that had preceded it. The mammoth separated from its herd just as they had predicted. The mist rolled in thick and heavy, muffling sound and obscuring distance. The younger hunter, leading the group now, signaled subtly with 2 fingers and a slight tilt of his chin. The others spread into formation, each knowing his place. Not one word passed among them. The wind cooperated, sweeping their scent away from the animal. They approached from 3 sides, moving like the quiet closing of a great stone door. When they were close enough to feel the vibration of the mammoth's breath through the ground, they struck. Spears flew in arcs so practiced that they had become extensions of thought. The mammoth roared, a rumble that tore through the fog like thunder tearing through a cloud. But the hunters held fast, anchored in purpose. They moved with coordinated precision, some distracting its charge, others plunging spears into its weakened flank, others driving it away from escape routes they had anticipated. The battle was not short, and it was not easy. The hunters risked their lives with every step. But gradually the great giant's strength waned. Its breath grew ragged, its movements slower. When it finally fell, its collapse shook the earth itself, echoing through the valley like the ending of a long, ancient struggle. The hunters stood in silence for a moment, not in triumph, but in acknowledgement. They respected the creature they had pursued for so long. They respected the immense gift it represented. Meat for weeks, bone for tools, hide for warmth, fat for fuel. Nothing would go to waste. Their survival depended on honoring the life that had ended so they could continue their own. As they worked, cutting through the thick hide and dividing the tasks evenly, the sky began to clear. The first warmth of sunlight seeped into the mist, turning it golden. They spoke softly now, voices low but steady. They recounted each detail of the hunt, both mistakes and successes, ensuring that every piece of knowledge would be preserved for the next season, the next challenge, the next generation. In the evening, as they carried their heavy loads back to camp, the valley felt different. It was quieter, emptied of the tension that had filled it for so many weeks. The children ran out to greet them, eyes wide with awe, and the elders stepped forward with nods of recognition. The hunters had not only provided food, they had reaffirmed the bond between their people and the land. A bond carved through equal parts, struggle, respect, and understanding. That night, as firelight flickered against the cliff walls, the warmth of the mammoth's fat burning steadily, they told the story again, not as a tale of conquest, but as a testament to endurance. They spoke of patience, of adaptation, of listening to the land. And as the children listened with wide eyes, they carried that lesson forward, ensuring that long after the mammoth's remains were gone, the memory of the hunt would continue to shape the lives of those who followed. For in that distant age, before cities, before writing, before certainty, survival was not a moment. It was a continuous story, written in footprints, in firelight, in breath, and in the unyielding will to endure. In the end, their story was not one of strength alone, but of understanding, of a people who survived by listening to the land, respecting the creatures they hunted, and passing their hard-earned wisdom from one generation to the next. Long before history had words to preserve them, these early humans carved their legacy into the earth itself, a quiet testament to resilience, cooperation, and the timeless will to endure. In the ancient times, before mountains were engraved on the face of the earth, and before the winds knew the names of the seas, gigantic creatures were born on this land. Their steps shook the soil every time they took a stride. Each one of them was as tall as an ancient tree, and their eyes glowed with the color of molten copper. They lived in wide valleys covered with old mists, while the early humans, weak and small compared to them, searched for their food among rocks and the roots of plants. Humans at that time believed that the giants were created from the anger of the earth itself, and that they knew no mercy and could not distinguish between a tree or a creature. They hunted without limits, picking up whatever stood before them, and if a small human happened to pass in the path of one of them, he would be crushed just like a flower, crushed beneath a stone. One night, when the moon was full and white, floating above the plains, the wise elders of the humans gathered around a small fire flickering in the heart of darkness. The eldest among them, whose skin had cracked like thirsty land, said, "We will not remain hunted forever. We must learn how to hide ourselves from their eyes, and how to make the earth protect us from them." From that night, the journey of adaptation began. They dug shelters in the cliffs of mountains and learned how to weave mud and grass to create sounds similar to the roars of predatory animals. And they released them to mislead the giants. They moved at night, and they walked against the direction of the wind so that their scent would not reach the noses of those colossal creatures. But the giants did not remain unaware for long. On a stormy morning, one of them discovered a human shelter inside a rocky crack. The earth trembled under his feet as he roared. The humans fled in every direction, leaving their shadows dancing like frightened wings. And from that day, the great chase began, one that generations remembered for long ages. Humans ran, knowing they could not match the strides of the giants. But they possessed what the giants did not: intelligence. They climbed into the land of ancient lava, where the rocks were sharp and the pits deep. Giants hated walking there, for the ground cracked beneath their weight, and the pits swallowed them one after another. Many long days passed until the last giant stopped at the edge of the lava land, gazing at the humans standing on the black rocks, exhausted but steadfast. He released a thunderous cry, then retreated, leaving behind enormous footprints that remained carved in the earth for thousands of years. And since that time, the early humans became known not for the strength of their bodies, but for an ancient secret they carried into later ages. He who knows fear can flee, but he who knows wisdom can survive. After the last giant withdrew from the land of lava, humans believed the chase had ended, and that the nights would return to their quiet stillness, just as they were before the appearance of those towering shadows. But they soon discovered that the earth does not forget the weight of those who walked upon it, and that giants never retreat except to return stronger. Only a few weeks passed before strange signs began to appear along the edges of the valleys. Broken trees as if struck by a violent storm, shattered rocks, and the smell of overturned soil drifting in the wind. All of them were clues to the passing of something enormous. Humans understood then that the giants had taken a new path, searching for them from a direction they had never expected.
One night,
as thick fog lay over the plains like a gray blanket, the people heard a low, distant sound, something that resembled the rumble of thunder. Though the sky was clear, The sound approached slowly, step by heavy step, until its echo vibrated through the walls of their stone shelters. A brave young man named Aaron stepped outside to see what was happening. When he reached the edge of a nearby hill, he saw a sight that froze his breath. There were 3 giants this time. Not one. They moved with caution, their massive heads turning from side to side, as if following a trail or searching for something they had lost long ago. Aaron rushed back to the shelter, panting, and told the elders what he had seen. Silence filled the cave, until an old woman with a rough, deep voice whispered, "They have not come to hunt. These are the steps of those searching for land or a home. The earth has changed, and perhaps they have changed with it." Her words lingered in the dim firelight as the tribe listened, their fear slowly shifting into a realization. What if the giants were not simply predators? What if they, too, were creatures struggling to survive in a world that was no longer theirs? Outside, the fog thickened, swallowing the horizon, and somewhere within that white silence, the giants continued their slow, steady search, each step echoing like a warning from an age the world had tried to forget. The night stretched long and heavy. No one inside the shelter slept. The quiet murmur of fear moved from one person to another like a cold breath. Outside, the fog pressed against the entrance of the cave, and every now and then, a deep vibration rolled beneath the ground, proof that the giants had not gone far. At dawn, a pale light seeped through the mist. Aaron and 2 hunters crept out to observe the land. The valley below was scarred, long trenches in the soil, uprooted trees, and giant footprints filled with water from the night dew. What troubled them most was not the destruction, but the direction the prints were leading. They were circling the valley, quietly, systematically, as if the giants were mapping the land, learning its shape, its paths, its hiding places. Aaron whispered, "They are searching for something they expect to find here." One of the hunters, older and wary, shook his head slowly. Or someone. By midday, the fog lifted, revealing a distant shape on the far ridge. One of the giants standing still, watching the valley. He wasn't moving. He seemed to be waiting, listening to something only he could hear. His massive chest rose and fell slowly, like a hill breathing. Then, without warning, he lifted his arm and pointed. Not at the valley, not at the plains, but directly toward the cliffs where humans hid. A deep, trembling sound escaped his throat. Not a roar, not a threat, but something unfamiliar. A call, a signal. Moments later, the other 2 giants answered from far away, their voices echoing through the canyons like rolling storms. The elders felt the vibrations inside the cave. The old woman leaned on her staff and whispered, They have found us. But what followed was stranger still. The giants did not charge. They did not break trees or hurl stones or run toward the caves. Instead, they gathered on the plain beneath the cliffs, forming a wide circle. Then they knelt, all three of them, placing their enormous hands on the ground as if performing some ancient rite. The humans watched, confused and trembling. Never before had giants behaved this way. Aaron stepped forward, heart pounding, unable to look away. The giants lowered their heads. The earth hummed beneath their palms. Small stones shifted. Dust rose. A faint glow pulsed from the soil. Something was awakening. Something older than giants. Older than humans. Older than the mountains themselves. Aaron felt it ripple through his bones. "This," he whispered. "This is why they returned." The ground continued to pulse gently, like the heartbeat of something sleeping deep beneath the earth. Dust swirled around the kneeling giants as if drawn toward an unseen force. The humans watched from the cliffs, torn between terror and a strange, growing curiosity. Aaron felt the vibration travel up through the stones beneath his feet. He whispered, barely breathing, "There's something under us. Something alive." The old woman closed her eyes as if searching her memory for a forgotten tale. "There were stories," she murmured, "spoken when I was a child. Stories of the first ground, where the earth kept memories of the earliest beings. It was said that giants were not the first to walk this world. They were only the last to remember what came before." Before anyone could question her, a deep crack sounded through the valley, a long, slow splitting of stone. A line appeared in the soil beneath the giants, stretching outward like a jagged root. The giants did not move. They pressed their hands deeper into the earth, their massive shoulders trembling with effort. Aaron's breath caught. From the crack, a faint column of warm air rose, carrying with it a scent unlike anything he had known, ancient, metallic, almost like lightning before a storm. The light beneath the ground grew brighter. One of the giants let out a low, rumbling sound, half chant, half lament. The others joined him, their voices merging into a deep, resonant harmony that shook dust from the cliffside. The sound was not aggressive, it was mournful, desperate, as if the giants were pleading with the earth itself. "That is no call of war," whispered one of the hunters. "They are praying." The old woman's eyes opened sharply. "No, not praying, summoning." Suddenly, the crack widened with a thunderous jolt. The cliffs trembled. Humans stumbled back, and a surge of hot air burst upward like a breath from a sleeping colossus. A deep silhouette appeared beneath the ground, shifting slowly, impossibly massive. Aaron's heart hammered against his ribs. "What is that?" he whispered. The old woman swallowed hard, her voice trembling. Something the giants fear more than we fear them. A rumble rolled through the valley, deeper and more ancient than anything they had heard before. The giants immediately lowered their heads to the ground in submission, like children before a forgotten parent. The earth shuddered again, and far below, something began to wake. The valley fell into a silence so absolute that even the wind seemed afraid to move. Every creature, bird, insect, human, held its breath. The earth was no longer merely trembling. It was breathing, drawing in long, ancient gulps of air from cracks that had not opened in thousands of years. Aaron felt the heat rising from the widening fissure below. It washed across his face like the breath of a giant furnace, carrying with it a distant, echoing sound, something like grinding stone or the slow turning of mountains. A shape stirred beneath the ground. Not a figure, not a limb, but an outline so vast it blurred the edges of the valley itself. One of the giants lifted his head, eyes glowing with fear, a rare, unmistakable fear that no human had ever seen in them. He made a sharp gesture with his hand, urging the other giants to rise. But the earth pulsed again. Boom! A sound that rolled through the bones of everyone present. The giants instantly folded back to their knees, their bodies trembling. Whatever lay beneath them commanded obedience. Aaron felt a cold dread slide across his spine. If giants kneel, he whispered, what kind of being must this be? The old woman gripped her staff so tightly her knuckles whitened. The first ones, she said softly. The giants were not the rulers of the early world, only its guardians. Beneath this land sleeps one of the beings who shaped the soil itself. The fissure split wider, the heat pouring out in waves, and for a heartbeat, Aaron glimpsed something inside. A massive form curled beneath layers of stone, scales or plates. He could not tell. A glow spreading under its surface like molten veins. A slumbering colossus as old as the world's first storms. The valley shook with another tremor. One of the giants leaned forward, pressing his forehead to the ground. His voice boomed, not in aggression, but in ritual. A plea, Arathor. The name trembled through the air like thunder rolled into a single word. The ground responded. A deep, thunderous exhale erupted from the fissure, sending dust spiraling into the sky. The humans stumbled back, shielding their eyes. A roar followed, a sound so low it seemed to vibrate the bloodstream, shaking the cliffs, the trees, the very shape of the horizon. The slumbering being beneath the earth was awakening. The old woman whispered, a creature from the world before ours, before the giants, before anything walked upright. Suddenly, the fissure snapped wider. Rocks exploded outward. A blast of scorching air knocked Aaron to the ground, and an enormous, glowing eye opened beneath the earth. It was not the eye of a beast, nor of a giant. It was something older, something elemental. Aaron met its gaze for one paralyzing moment. He felt an overwhelming pressure inside his skull. Images flashing in an instant. Mountains forming, oceans boiling, stars falling, giants bowing, humans fleeing. And then, darkness swallowing everything. The vision vanished as quickly as it came. Aaron lay gasping, trembling, staring at the glowing eye. The earth shook once more. And then, the ancient being began to rise. The glowing eye sank back for a moment, as though measuring the world above it, measuring the giants, the valley, the tiny humans trembling along the cliff. The ground beneath Aaron's hands felt warm now, pulsing like the heartbeat of some enormous creature buried only a few breaths beneath the soil. A deep, grinding sound rumbled through the valley. Not an eruption, not a collapse, a shift, as if the earth itself were moving aside. The fissure widened, pushing rock and soil outward in slow, deliberate waves. Chunks of ancient stone, older than any human memory, rose and fell like drifting embers around a forge. Aaron staggered to his feet, the heat pressing against his skin near the valley floor. One of the giants, a massive figure with cracked, stone-like skin, lifted his head and growled something guttural and rhythmic. It was not a warning, it was a chant, a ritual. All the giants joined him in that deep, trembling chorus. Their voices shook the air, blending with the pulsing earth. The valley seemed to hum with their resonance. Above them, dust spiraled like silver threads in the heated currents. The old woman's eyes widened. "They are not calling him," she whispered. "They are begging him to sleep." Aaron's stomach tightened. If beings of such size, beings who feared nothing, were pleading for the Ancient One to remain buried, then waking it must be a disaster beyond comprehension. The fissure suddenly split into a perfect circle, as if shaped by unseen hands, and a massive structure emerged from below. Not flesh, not bone. A colossal stone crest, carved with swirling, ancient patterns that pulsed with molten light. It towered high enough to cast a shadow across half the valley. Slowly, the crest lifted further, revealing a curved surface beneath, smooth, dark, and scaled. Each plate the size of a human hut. The molten glow from within its fissures traced patterns across the surface like veins of fire. Aaron's voice quivered. "Is it a creature?" The old woman shook her head. "It is more than a creature. A being that slumbered through the shaping of continents. A force of the early world. Before giants roamed, before humans stood upright." The crest rose again, a massive, slow movement, impossibly heavy yet deliberate. Beneath it, the ground cracked from the weight. The air shimmered with heat. One giant, braver or more desperate than the others, stood tall and hurled a thunderous shout toward the fissure. A challenge or a warning. The valley responded with an explosion of steam and fire. A wave of scorching heat blasted outward, sweeping the giant off his feet and sending shock waves through the mountainsides. Trees ignited instantly. Rocks glowed red. The ground rippled like liquid. Aaron and the others shielded themselves behind a ledge, feeling the air recoil with boiling fury. When the steam cleared, the ancient being had risen higher. Two more glowing eyes opened. Then a third. Its gaze swept the valley. Slow, deliberate, intelligent. Aaron felt as if the world itself had stopped breathing. The giants fell silent, bowing deeply, pressing their foreheads to the scorched earth. But the Ancient One was not looking at them. Its massive, luminous eyes had turned toward the human standing on the cliff, toward Aaron. The old woman grasped his arm. In her voice trembled a fear so deep it cracked her whisper. It remembers humans. The air fell still, and it doesn't remember us kindly. The ancient being's eyes, those enormous, molten spheres, focused on Aaron with a depth that felt impossibly old. They were not angry, nor curious. They were remembering. Aaron felt a sudden weight press against his mind, as if an invisible hand had reached through the air and was turning the pages of his thoughts. He gasped, his knees buckling. The old woman clutched him, trying to pull him back, but the force was overwhelming. Images flooded his vision. Not dreams, not imagination, but memories that were not his. A world of burning skies, colossal beings shaping valleys with their hands, humans fleeing across plains of ash, and the Ancient One, towering above them all, issuing judgment with fire. Aaron tore his gaze away and collapsed to the ground. Breathless, he felt the lingering echo of the ancient being's presence inside his mind. Like a fading tremor. Below, the giants stood again, slowly, reluctantly. Their bodies were rigid with terror. Yet they positioned themselves between the humans and the rising colossus. One giant slammed his fist into the earth, producing a deep thud that echoed through the mountains, a signal, a warning. Another giant lifted a massive stone slab, carved with symbols that glowed faintly, holding it as if it were a shield. A third giant raised his voice in a roar that shook dust from the cliffs. But the Ancient One did not react to them. Its eyes were fixed on the human still. The old woman spoke stiffly, her voice breaking. It remembers the first humans, the ones who defied it, those who tried to steal fire from its domain. It thinks we are them. A crack appeared along the creature's massive crest, spreading in a line of molten light, and for the first time, part of its true form emerged from beneath the earth. A vast, armored head rose, covered in plates like volcanic rock. Steam hissed between its scales. Every movement shifted the ground like an earthquake. Aaron tried to stand, but the force pushing him down was almost physical. "Why is it focusing on us?" he whispered. The old woman didn't answer immediately. Her eyes widened, and she slowly turned toward him as if seeing something beyond her understanding. "Aaron, it's not looking at all humans. It's looking at you." He froze. "Me? Why?" Before she could respond, the ancient being moved. A slow, monumental motion, dash, dash. The kind that made mountains seem fragile, as its head rotated toward the cliff where Aaron stood. The giants immediately shifted, forming a wall between the humans and the creature. Their voices thundered in unison, chanting something old and desperate. The ground trembled beneath their feet. The ancient being exhaled, not fire, but a wave of scorching air that washed over the valley like the breath of a dying star. The giants braced themselves, digging their massive hands into the earth to remain standing. The chant grew louder, resonating through the valley, echoing off the cliffs. Aaron felt the vibrations in his chest. The Ancient One paused. For a moment, just a moment, it seemed to consider the giant's plea. Then, a sound like a cracking mountain split the air. The ancient being unfurled its crest fully, a massive, radiant shell that reflected molten light across the valley, and the earth quaked violently beneath it. The old woman's voice rose above the tremors. "Aaron, listen to me carefully. Whatever it sees in you is something ancient, something it fears, or something it hates." Aaron swallowed hard, heart pounding. "What do I do?" Her eyes met his with a mix of fear and certainty. "You must find out what it wants, because if we don't stop it now, the giants, the valley, and all humans beyond these mountains will burn." In the light of a distant dawn, unlike the dawn of today, when the earth was wetter and wilder, and the air was thick with the scent of algae and mud, there lived those who came before us by thousands of centuries. They had no names to inscribe their histories, nor a language to hang their tales upon. Yet their footsteps pressed into the clay, the fires they hid to preserve warmth remained witnesses to the fact that they had been here. That life millions of years ago was a mixture of fear, wonder, and discovery. The early humans lived in small, close-knit groups, bound by fear of the night and hope for the day. Their dwellings were no more than caves carved into hillsides, or primitive huts made of intertwined branches. They chose their locations carefully, where flowing waters converged, and the wind struck the cliffs, shielding them from prowling beasts. In those times, the earth did not belong to the weak. Its forests, plains, and swamps were ruled by ferocious creatures. Giant serpents slithered among the trees, their massive bodies as long as living trunks, coiling around their prey to crush bone as easily as brittle branches. The early humans knew that survival came only through intelligence, and that the strength of such beings could be overcome only by careful planning and a patience as enduring as stone. One night, when the moon hung full and its light filtered through the gaps of the forest branches, the tribe heard a deep sound, like distant thunder, yet it emanated from the grass itself. The ground trembled slightly, and a cold scent poured from the earth, as if exhaled from the depths of a dark cavern. They realized that the giant serpent had returned, the same that had taken a child from them in last season's rains. Its quest was not for vengeance, but for safety, and to restore a balance without which life could not continue. The men and women gathered around a faint fire, exchanging looks before words. The eldest among them, with scattered white hair and a face carved by experience, raised his staff and gestured toward a group of young hunters. He did not command. He suggested, as if to say, "If you wish for the children to survive, we must face the shadow that lurks between the trees." With the first rays of dawn, the group moved, carrying spears made from hardened bones and sharp stones they had polished over days. They knew the serpent could sense body heat, so they covered themselves in cold mud to hide their warmth from its gaze. Instead of rushing it, they tracked its traces in the earth, a wide trail splitting the grass, a heavy scent they could not mistake. They found it near a wide pool coiled around a broken trunk, its enormous mouth opening like a gateway to another darkness. They did not attack at once, but waited until it lifted its head, exposing its body and leaving it vulnerable. One of the young men advanced slowly, dragging his feet through the mud to make a sound that would draw the beast's attention. The serpent lifted its head suddenly, exhaled a scorching puff of air, and lunged toward the movement. Only then did the plan unfold. From a tree above, two hunters dropped a net woven from strong fibers, entangling the serpent's front. At the same moment, others rushed from the sides, driving spears into precisely targeted spots, taught by the knowledge of their ancestors, just behind the head and along the sides where the scales were softer. The scene was silent, filled with intense focus, as if the entire forest held its breath. With each movement of the serpent, the earth shook, but the humans remained steady, using their wits against its might until finally it calmed and stilled. They returned to their tribe with thick hides to craft shields, meat to sustain them through drought, and most importantly, with reassurance. In those times, victory was measured not by possessions, but by survival and by the lessons one could pass to the next generation. Over the days that followed, they told the story of that quiet night when they faced the serpent, and how they united to remain alive. For them, stories were more than tales. They were the tribe's memory, a candle illuminating a path without maps, a covenant linking the living to those who had gone before. Thus their lives continued, a series of confrontations and discoveries, between struggle with nature and lessons learned from it, between fear of darkness and the calm born of fire's warmth. Perhaps none of them remained now, but their story lives in every step we take upon this earth, and in every moment when a modern human asks, "How did our ancient ancestors live?" That victory over the giant serpent was only one chapter in the volatile life of early humans. The world in those times was never steady. It shifted like the restless waves of a ceaseless sea. Days after returning to their cave, the weather changed abruptly. Dark clouds, like the hides of black animals, hovered over the forest. The air thickened, the winds rose, and every creature in the woods seemed to brace for something they already knew. The tribe realized that the storm season had begun and that they must prepare to move to higher ground. For them, migration was not merely moving from one place to another. It was a new risk. The paths they took were fraught with surprises. Predators searching for prey, mud-laden lands, and hidden trails ending abruptly at sheer cliffs. Yet there was no alternative. If the caves flooded, no shelter would protect their fires or dry hides. The tribe moved at dawn's first weak light, walking in a long line. Men led to scout the path, women carried children and supplies in the middle, and young hunters flanked the sides, watching every movement between the trees. Silence was not a choice, but a necessity. Animals awake at this hour were anxious, many seeking shelter like them. As they approached a shallow stream, they noticed something unusual. Birds circled the area, as if sensing prey or danger. One hunter crouched over the damp sand. There, he saw deep, enormous tracks, heavier than a human's by many times. He recognized them immediately. A big cat, perhaps a rocky lion or a saber-toothed predator capable of felling a man with a single strike. But the matter was not theirs alone. At the water's edge, a giant female mammoth struggled to lift her calf trapped between tree roots, dragged down by the night flood. She trumpeted in a deep voice that shook the air, lifting her massive trunk in an attempt to rescue her young. Despite her immense strength, the mud held her. The tribe watched silently. The mammoth was no enemy. It was a creature fighting to survive, like them. Yet they understood that her cries would attract the big cat, and if that happened, the calf would not be the only victim. The men exchanged short glances. Their elder advanced slowly, carrying a long branch, waving it gently. He knew that approaching too closely might anger the mother, but leaving her alone with her calf could spark a bloody battle that served no one. He raised the branch high, emitting a strange tone passed down through generations, a sound meant to calm large animals, signaling that they meant no harm. The mother paused, turned toward them, eyes wide, fear and instinct mixed in her gaze. She did not charge. 4 men slowly approached, using strong logs to lift the calf from the mud. After several careful attempts, the young mammoth slipped upward, breathing hard, shaking from the cold. The mother lifted her trunk high, emitting a short, grateful trumpet, then departed with her calf toward the forest. A strange calm settled afterward, as if the forest itself had realized that humans were not merely hunters, but beings striving as best they could to live without destroying all that surrounded them. Yet that calm did not last. Hours later, the tribe reached rocky heights overlooking the valley. They witnessed a breathtaking scene. Heavy rain pouring across the plains, the swelling river reflecting the gray sky, everything glistening as though the earth had become a giant mirror. They had to find a new cave before nightfall. They walked along the cliff edge until discovering a narrow opening in the rock, hiding an inner passage. They lit torches and stepped in slowly. The space opened into natural chambers, carved over thousands of years. On the walls, faded drawings depicted massive animals, red handprints and long spears suggesting hunts. Perhaps people like them had once passed here, living similar stories now lost to time. In the center, they lit a fire, arranging stones to contain the warmth. Children sat close, watching sparks leap like tiny fleeing stars. The elders began recounting a new story, adding it to the tribe's memory, of the giant serpent, the mother and her calf, and the paths that tested human patience every day. Yet the true story unfolded in the deep night. Lying on their hides, eyes closed with raindrops striking the rock above, they felt a shared realization they were not alone in this world. Their survival depended not only on strength, but on unity and understanding the land they inhabited. Thus, they slept beneath the firelight, unaware that tomorrow would bring a new chapter of relentless life, and that every step they took in this vast world would one day become part of a story for those who came after them. With the dawn of the next day, the tribe awoke to faint light seeping through the cave opening, the smell of wet earth filling the space. The night had not passed easily. Winds whispered constantly, and distant echoes of falling rocks kept them half awake, listening to the world as though confirming it would not betray them. The first to rise was the young man who had faced the giant serpent. He stood at the cave entrance, scanning the valley. Mist cloaked the landscape in trees resembling silent, ghostly sentinels. Then he noticed something else. New footprints near the rocks, human, slightly larger than their own. He returned quickly to the others, gathering the men around the fire. He told them what he had seen. They exchanged wary glances. The presence of another tribe meant only two possibilities: an alliance for survival or a struggle for everything: water, game, even shelter. In prehistoric life, a misjudgment often meant the end of one side. The elder decided to investigate before the tribe could be surprised by uninvited guests. 3 hunters accompanied him, moving silently among the trees, sensing the path with their eyes and ears. Soon, they spotted smoke rising from behind large boulders. Approaching carefully, they found a small group of humans around a dying fire. Their bodies were exhausted, faces painted with gray, a camouflage used for hunting. They were tired, injured, and clearly survivors, not enemies. The elder advanced, hands raised, signaling peaceful intentions. The other group turned toward him, surprise and caution in their eyes. Communication relied on gestures more than words. Minutes later, they understood. These people had fled a distant valley flooded by storms, losing half their group, seeking shelter until the earth dried and the sky settled. The two tribes returned to their cave with the strangers. A heavy silence fell for a moment. Their own tribe was unaccustomed to receiving outsiders, yet the women and children saw the wounds, saw the fatigue etched into their faces, and realized these people were no threat. Everyone gathered around the fire, sharing what little food they had. Some dried meat, a handful of berries, and a sip of water from the large skin container. As they ate, one of the strangers began to tell his story. His voice was low, yet filled with awe. He spoke of a strange beast seen near the valley 2 days before the flood. A massive creature, covered in thick fur, resembling a bear, but taller, with teeth wider than usual. They had heard its roar in the night, then saw it approaching their camp, pawing at the earth as if searching for something buried. It did not attack them directly, but its presence made everyone consider leaving before curiosity turned into predation. The tribe listened in silence, knowing the forest held many creatures they had never seen, and that every story carried lessons to be learned. When the stranger finished, the hunters exchanged worried glances. The beast's territory overlapped the valley the tribes had traveled yesterday, possibly following the same paths. The following night passed in cautious vigilance. The rain continued intermittently, and the smoke from the fire painted strange shapes on the cave ceiling, like warnings from the outside world. Yet everyone felt a sense of strength in their unity. By the morning of the third day, the tribe made a bold decision. They would no longer hide. They would form a large hunting group combining men from both tribes to explore the surrounding area for signs of the strange beast. It was not for battle, but to protect their children and secure their future. The large group set out. Their steps on the muddy ground were slow and heavy, but their eyes were alert. They were no longer just individuals fighting to survive. They had become a single force. In the depths of the forest, where shadows merged with sound, they began to sense something watching them. Something massive, breathing quietly, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. At the edge of a dense forest, where branches interlaced like fingers trying to grasp sunlight, the hunters paused. They heard something. Not the rustle of wind, not the chirp of birds, but a steady rhythm, like a deep pulse emanating from the earth itself. They exchanged glances. This was not the sound of familiar prey, but of a heavier, slower, stranger creature. The elder advanced cautiously, signaling the others to stay low. A few meters ahead, on a small ledge overlooking a wide clearing, one hunter crawled over a rock to peer down. His eyes widened in simultaneous awe and fear. There, in the clearing, stood the beast described by the strangers. It was enormous, like a boulder cloaked in fur. Its shoulders were broad, its legs sturdy as tree trunks, and its mouth full of long, powerful teeth, designed not just to pierce, but to tear through bone. It resembled a bear, yet taller by twice, heavier by 3 times. With every step it took, the ground trembled beneath the trees. The creature did not attack. It sniffed the earth, probing with its massive body, as if searching for something lost long ago. It approached a large tree trunk and began scratching it with sharp claws. Shards of wood flew into the air. The hunters understood that the beast was not inherently aggressive, yet if it felt threatened, it would destroy anything in its path. The hunter returned to the others, eyes wide, and they whispered among themselves. They did not plan to fight the beast. To do so would likely mean death for one side. All they wanted was to ensure it moved away from their cave and from their children waiting behind the mountain rocks, hearts tiny and anxious. The discussion was long. Finally, the elder proposed a simple plan: fire. Most large creatures of that era feared the smell of smoke, avoiding areas where flames burned. But lighting a fire near the beast meant approaching it, a risk as great as facing it directly. Still, there was no other choice. The elder chose 3 of the most agile men, along with one from the other tribe known for moving silently. They carried bundles of dry grass and stones to spark fire, and approached the left side of the forest, where the wind would carry the smoke toward the clearing. They advanced slowly, crawling through mud, hiding behind tree trunks. Hearts pounded with every calculated step, as if each could be their last. Once near enough, they piled the grass into small heaps and sparked the first flame. At first, nothing caught fire, but persistent blowing lifted the smoke gradually, forming a thin gray thread rising into the sky. The scent reached the beast. It paused, turning its massive head toward the smoke, emitting a low, warning growl. The men fed the flames. The smoke thickened, and the fire provoked the ancient instinct in the creature, which had long feared fire. Finally, the beast moved. It did not run nor roar. It simply turned and walked deeper into the forest, away from the cave, away from humans. The men watched until it vanished among the trees, no longer feeling the tremor of the earth beneath them. Returning to the rest of the group, they were met with relieved eyes. It was not a victory over a monster, but over an ancient fear over the unknown itself. Back in the cave at sunset, children ran to them first, holding their men's hands, checking the hides as if to confirm they had truly returned. The 2 tribes sat together around the growing bright fire, like a small sun shielding them from everything. The elder spoke, his voice calm, telling what had happened, how wisdom was chosen over brute force, and how humans, since the dawn of time, were not the strongest in body but in mind and in their ability to unite when threatened. As night passed, the rain ceased, the moonlight escaped through clouds. Everyone sensed that the coming days would be calmer, the forest granting time for life, hunting, learning, and new stories. That night, they slept peacefully, as if the earth finally allowed them rest even for a brief moment. Little did they know that this moment of calm would mark a new chapter, one that would alter their destiny, as they would soon discover something buried in the earth, a secret from the world millions of years ago. In the following morning, as fog lifted and dew sparkled on the forest leaves, the tribes realized that what they had lived was more than survival. It was part of a greater story than any one person's strength. They had seen with their own eyes that the vast world, with its giant creatures, wildness, and majestic beauty, favored only those who understood it, not those who sought to dominate it. Their footprints in the mud were fragile, likely to vanish in a few days, yet their impact on the human story endured. Survival was no accident. It was a result of unity, intelligence, and courage. Faced with a merciless world, against the giant serpent, the mother mammoth, and the mysterious beast whose steps shook the ground, they proved that humans, from their very first moments, were born to resist, to explore, to protect, and to learn. To rise above fear. The fire they lit was more than a tool. It was a declaration. We are here, and we will live, despite all that surrounds us. And so, amid forest shadows, the echoes of rain and the trembling night, the first contours of the human story were born. A story of those who left no written mark, yet inscribed their existence in the silence of the earth, and in the memory of those who would come after. No matter how time advances, no matter how life changes, their story remains a deep whisper, reminding us that humans were never mere creatures of the earth, but always, inevitably, path makers. And so, when the morning breathed its first light, and sunlight pierced the tree trunks as if the world were opening its eyes anew, the two tribes felt something long unknown, a sense of belonging in a shifting universe, not just as visitors. They had endured heavy days, confronting fear in its many forms, yet emerged stronger, not in muscle, but in spirit, unbowed by the fiercest storms. Within the cave, beside the fire that flickered and blazed with each added branch, they understood that the human story was not one of blind struggle with nature. On a deep, shadowed evening, nearly 50,000 years ago, when Europe was covered by harsh icy plains and dense, tangled pine forests, two kinds of humans shared the land. The Neanderthals, strong-bodied with thick muscles, and the newly arrived Homo sapiens, still learning the ways to survive on this continent. Their encounters were rare, and often marked by caution. But that era witnessed moments of humanity rarely told, one of which was about to be buried beneath layers of time. Had its remnants not remained alive in the bones of unknown, long-buried individuals, in that time, Neanderthals lived in small, closely knit groups, relying on collective hunting and sheltering near their dwellings during storms. One of them, reconstructed by scientists from skeletal evidence, was called Garon, a young, strong man, short in stature compared to Homo sapiens, yet broad-shouldered, with hands stronger than those of humans today. Garin was responsible for gathering firewood and tracking animal signs before the hunters set out, on one particularly harsh night, as fog swallowed the forest edges. A strange sound reached his ears. It was neither the growl of an animal nor the creak of snow-laden branches. It resembled a long groan, like the cry of a desperate being. At first, he hesitated. Approaching an unknown source at night could mean facing a cave bear or a saber-toothed cat. Yet something compelled him to continue, perhaps an instinctive curiosity, or perhaps the sense that the sound did not belong to a predator. He advanced cautiously, holding a short spear. When he reached the edge of a rocky depression, he saw a body lying in the snow, taller than himself, thinner, and with facial features entirely different. A pronounced chin, a high forehead, and wide, weary eyes staring unfocused. It was a Homo sapiens, one of the newcomers whose traces had begun appearing along riverbanks only a few seasons before. The man had suffered a severe injury to his leg, perhaps from a fall or an animal attack. The blood had frozen along the wound's edges, yet he was still alive. Garin felt no urge to flee. He knelt, examined the body, realizing that the cold alone would kill it before any other threat. A long silence stretched between them. No language, no shared history. Just two beings exposed to the same vulnerability before nature. When the man tried to raise his hand in plea, Garin made his decision. He lifted the man onto his back, despite his height and weight, and moved slowly toward his group's shelter. The physical burden was one challenge. The fear of his tribe's reaction was another. Homo sapiens were potential competitors, strangers, perhaps even threats. Yet he continued. When he reached the cave, the group halted in astonishment. Fire burned at the center, and the scent of roasting meat filled the air. The tribe's elder approached Garin, pounding his chest with heavy reprimands at the audacity, but upon seeing the wounded man, noting the feeble breaths and the imminent threat of death, he paused. Neanderthals shared the responsibility of survival. They cared for their sick for many years, as studies have shown. So despite their hesitation, there was no justification to leave a man dying in the snow. They yielded to a value older than enmity, the value of life. The wound was dressed with herbs mixed with animal fat, and the man was placed near the fire. Over the following weeks, he learned to read their faces and signals, while they watched his recovery with patience, as if tending one of their own children. He observed their precise hunting methods and tightly organized social structure for the first time in a long while. He felt safe in return. He offered them something invaluable: knowledge. He used stone tools of more advanced techniques, could ignite fire in ways unfamiliar to them, and crafted small flint blades that impressed Garin. Gradually, he was treated as one of them, despite his different features and the fact that he never spoke a word of their language. After months, when his leg had fully healed, The day came for the man to leave. Winter had passed. Rivers were freeing themselves from ice. Garon presented him with a short spear he had made, while the man gave the Neanderthals a sharp flint blade of a style they had never seen. They exchanged the same silent smile all humans share, a smile of gratitude. The man headed toward the horizon where his own group resided, yet he kept glancing back at the cave. His heart was caught between two worlds. They had saved him, those he once considered different, perhaps inferior, and he knew that moment would echo through the generations yet to come. Thousands of years later, scientists would discover the remains of a man who had lived among two distinct human groups. His bones would show signs of healing from a severe wound, and beside him would lie blades combining techniques of both Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. Neither his nor Garen's real names would be known, but their story remained etched in flint and bone, a testimony that survival in that era was not based solely on strength, but on rare acts of compassion in an unforgiving world. Thus, the Earth memorialized a single act of rescue, small in its moment, vast in its consequence. The day a Neanderthal saved a giant man, bridging two worlds that did not yet realize their futures would diverge. Yet in that brief moment, were one. The Homo sapiens walked away from the cave, leaning on his new wooden staff, as the cold breeze carried the scent of melting ice from the hillsides. He hadn't gone far before he realized he missed the voices of those he had lived among for months. He had learned their habits, the faint laughter resembling the rumble of a small stone rolling, their shy gratitude, and their precise way of dividing meat among the group. He saw in them something unexpected, a humanity similar to that of his own tribe, yet more primal, closer to nature itself. During his journey, he recalled nights spent in the cave, watching Garon by the fire, staring at the flames as if understanding something within him words could not express. They communicated through gestures, through eyes, through a mysterious language that, in that era, was perhaps the closest thing to truth. After 2 days of walking, he encountered footprints of relatively modern humans, light, spaced steps, resembling those of his tribe. His heart leapt. He had finally reached familiar territory. But before calling out, he caught a faint scent of smoke, not the old, cold fire, but a small, live flame. Cautiously, he approached, hiding behind thick bushes. There, on the half-frozen riverbank, were his tribe, or what remained of them, no more than 20, their faces exhausted, their leather clothes torn. They had endured a harsh winter, scarcer animals, weaker shelters, perhaps conflicts with other groups. A child saw him first, a small boy weaving a rudimentary net from plant fibers. His eyes widened, and the bundle fell from his hands. He called out in a trembling voice, and and the tribe gathered around the man returning from death. The moment was silent, then erupted with amazement and joy. His mother held him, unable to believe he was alive. The tribe's leader, a tall, thin man with a sharp gaze, inspected the wound that had nearly killed him. They had assumed he would not survive. Yet here he was, with a strange spear and flint blades unlike anything they had known. He sat among them, explaining with gestures and drawings in the dirt what had happened. The short, strong man carrying the taller one, the cave, the fire, the hand giving him food. The half-carved bone bead one elder Neanderthal had worn as a sign of affection. His people stared in astonishment. They had never imagined that such strong, differently built beings could show compassion to a stranger. Days passed, and the tribe gradually realized the man had changed. He had returned with new skills, collective hunting techniques learned from Neanderthals, faster, more stable fire lighting methods, use of animal fat for insulation, and reshaping blades in unfamiliar ways. Gradually, the tribe relied on this knowledge for survival in the next hunting season. Yet the Neanderthal influence did not end there. The man felt the help he received could not remain unreciprocated. He knew his tribe would not survive another harsh winter alone. The ice grew fiercer. Prey fled south, and unknown peoples appeared on the horizon. One night, sitting alone by the fire, he stared at the sparks, recalling Garen's face, the way he pushed snow away from the cave opening to protect the smoke, the elder's reassuring hand on his shoulder, and the children's gaze. They had never seen him as a stranger, but as a guest in need of care. At dawn, he decided he would return to them. When he told his tribe of his plan, they were divided. Some feared the Neanderthals' reaction. Others thought it madness to go back after surviving. But he remained resolute, using gestures and drawings to convey that the bond between humans, regardless of form, was stronger than anything that divided them. After 2 days of preparation, he set out with 3 trusted companions. They walked across the white plains, following the rock markers until they finally reached the familiar rocky entrance. This time, however, the sounds inside were not of life. The place was eerily silent. He stepped forward and called in the learned manner, but there was no reply. Inside, he found remnants of a fire, a half-carved bone, and a pile of animal hides, seemingly left in haste. It appeared as though they had fled suddenly. While inspecting the place, he found something chilling, a massive footprint in the fresh snow outside, the print of a cave bear. He recoiled in shock. Realizing the attack was recent, he ran into the valley where Garen used to gather wood. Among the trees, he found a dark stain of blood, but no body, perhaps dragged away by animals. There was, however, something else. A broken bone bead, halved, the same bead one elder had always worn. He knelt, holding the bead in his hands, feeling something inside break. They had saved him, secured a foothold for his life. Yet time had not waited for them. Slowly, he stood, eyes filled with unspoken sorrow. He gestured to his companions to return, but he himself was changed. He now bore a larger responsibility to protect the wisdom of those who had devoted their lives to survival without ever having the chance to tell their story. Upon returning to his tribe, he recounted what he had seen and buried the bead with them as a symbol of a new covenant. From that point on, his tribe adopted some Neanderthal rituals in respect, placing bones near the fire, watching the moon as a companion, not merely as a light in the night. Over generations, Neanderthal traces disappeared from the land, but their mark on the hearts of survivors remained, their ideas intertwined with those of Homo sapiens, passing through time as remnants of a people not entirely erased, but living within the empathy of those they had touched. Thus, the story of that rescue spanned thousands of years. It was not just an individual event, but a hidden connection between two peoples. The day a Neanderthal saved a giant man became the first thread in a long, unseen chain linking past to future. A delicate thread that reminded humanity that its beginning was not in constant war, but in a moment of mercy on a cold night. A moment that made this world possible. Spring returned slowly that year, hesitating to touch the land that had witnessed the departure of those unknown to history. In the heart of the Homo sapiens who carried the half-broken bead back to his tribe, the world was no longer the same. He understood that what he had witnessed in the Neanderthal cave was not merely a personal survival event, but a window into another form of humanity, a form whose bodies vanished, yet remained imprinted in the memory of those who came after. Years passed after that incident, yet the presence of the Neanderthals never left the man, nor the lives of the tribe that had embraced his story. His group began to adopt their ways more deeply, collective hunting in precise circles, building shelters from heavy stones instead of weak poles, and even decorating their bodies with lines of charcoal and crushed bone, a ritual he had observed over countless nights by the cave fire when they celebrated the hunter's return. Over time, the children who had never seen a Neanderthal began to repeat stories of the kind giants living in the mountains, tending fires as though they were part of them. The man listened to these tales with a bittersweet smile. He knew the truth. Those giants were no longer there, and the mountains children imagined were only links between two worlds. The mountains no longer held anything but silence. Yet the story did not end there. With the passing of tens of seasons, other changes appeared in nature. Ice slowly retreated, animal numbers increased, and new human groups began to appear. Some were friendly, others fierce in competition for territory. The world was changing, and a new era was approaching. On one exploratory journey, more than 10 seasons after his rescue, the man discovered something strange near a northern river, the remains of another small cave, smaller than the one he had lived in. but unmistakably bearing traces of Neanderthal presence. A notched stone, remnants of a primitive hearth, a tiny leather covering as if for an infant. He realized that some of them might have survived the bear attack. Or perhaps this was another group he had never known. He rushed to the cave, but found only traces on the walls, black lines drawn in charcoal. Perhaps the fingers of a small child learning to draw thousands of years ago. He sat on the ground, running his fingers over the marks left by hands that no longer existed. It felt like a covenant, an oath to preserve whatever remained of them, however small. He gathered some tools, buried others where animals would not find them, trying, in his primitive way, to safeguard the memory of a people whose names and language were unknown to him, but whose hearts he had known. In the following years, his tribe grew. Children became adults, and they continued to tell the story of the man saved by Neanderthals. Adding imaginative details, he did not mind. He knew that stories were what gave people their roots. One evening, when the man had grown old and his hair turned white, he sat by the fire with a group of children around him. They wanted to hear the story one last time. Their faces glowed in the firelight, like the faces of the children who had witnessed him rise from near death in his youth. He told them quietly, almost tearfully, how Garin had lifted him onto his back despite his weight, how they had shared their food, how he had learned from their elder, and how he returned to find the cave silent. When he reached the moment of discovering the broken bead, everyone fell silent, as if the very air had stopped out of respect. When he finished, silence reigned. Even the fire seemed to quiet down, listening. Then a small child stepped forward, not yet born when the events occurred. The child sat beside him, holding a small piece of bone he was carving, and offered it to the man, saying softly, "We will not forget." That night, the man looked up at the sky. The stars shone brightly, forming a distant path across time. He imagined Garon, his elders, women and children walking that path, not extinct, but immortal in memory. Years later, when the man himself passed away, he was found lying near the fire, the half-broken bead on his chest, and a small string of bones he had crafted at the end of his life. His tribe understood then that he wished to leave the world carrying the memory of those who had saved him, to pass on their impact in turn. Millennia later, the wind buried the caves and plains. The landscape changed. But the story, the origin story, passed down through generations, transformed into legend, then distant memory. When modern scientists arrived, they found the remains of a Homo sapiens carrying a unique bead unlike anything his people were accustomed to, with bones showing signs of an old wound healed in an unusual way. No one knew his name, nor the name of his rescuer. Yet they understood one truth. Humanity did not begin with conflict, but with a moment of mercy on a harsh night. when a Neanderthal bent over a stranger, lifted him onto his back, and set in motion a chain of actions that would reach, improbably, to our present day. And so, the story continued longer than any of them lived, testifying that what remains of humans is not bones nor tools, but the impact they leave in the hearts of others, even if that impact is merely a hand extended to save a stranger in a time that knew little mercy. Centuries passed. The land swallowed the traces of ancient tribes as a mother swallows the memories of grown children. Yet the story never died. It traveled as whispers across time, told in different forms, its details shifting, but its essence remained. That someone, on a stormy night, lifted another human onto his back, and in doing so, changed the course of history without knowing it. Tens of thousands of years after the Homo sapiens left, new humans arrived in those European plains. They cut forests to build huts, dug the earth to bury their dead, and lit fires as their ancestors had. One season, a hunter in a small village found a strangely shaped stone near a dry river bank. At first, he thought it was an ordinary flint, but when he turned it over, he felt its finely polished edge, a thin blade blending two different crafting styles. He did not understand its meaning but brought it to the village elders. An elder, inspecting the lines etched along its side, said, "This was not made by our ancestors. It came from another time." No one knew how the stone reached them. Yet the ancient hospitality of the village made them treat the piece as sacred, placing it near newborns, as though blessing their future with the spirit of two peoples who had once merged for a moment and then vanished. They did not know that the stone was crafted by the man after returning from the Neanderthal cave, carrying a fragment of Garen's memory. It passed from hand to hand, generation to generation, eventually buried by the winds under layers of silt, forgotten by tongue. Then came another age, stone cities and bronze swords, when myths were written on animal hides and hung in temples. An old priest, fond of collecting tales from travelers, heard a strange story one night. Unlike any other, it told there was a people of kind giants in the mountains. They did not speak as we do, but their hearts were broader than their stones. One night, they saved a lost man in the snow. They carried him to their cave, treated him, and when he recovered, he returned to his people to tell what he had seen. From that day, humans learned that mercy was stronger than fire itself. The priest recorded the story on a deer hide and placed it in the temple library. He did not know it was not a fable, but a faint memory of a true event, thousands of years earlier, when two human species shared the same land and learned the secret of survival from one another. Over the decades, archaeologists began finding scattered evidence of a remarkable intermingling between two prehistoric cultures. Flint blades unlike those of Homo sapiens, yet unlike Neanderthal tools. something in between, a creation born from unexpected cooperation between the two species.